Hello, welcome back to what I call the Schools Out podcast. Conversations where we talk about learning outside of the school walls. It's Philip Mott, and today the conversation I have to share with you is a conversation I had with a high school English teacher and an ungrading high school English teacher, I might add. She's been practicing what is called ungrading, which is limiting as many evaluations within the academic setting as possible, but also parent to a teenager who has attended a democratic school. So in this video, you're going to hear Christine and I talk about the tensions that she feels as a public school teacher and as the parent of a student who is in a democratic setting, that difference between seeing her daughter respected in that environment, but then also being in an environment where she is expected to do things that many of us believe are disrespectful of student autonomy. We talk about what the democratic school structure is like. We talk about where grading comes from. We talk about white supremacy and how grading really provides a framework for that and incentivizes, creates a lot of inequality, which I loved hearing her perspective on. We talk about science fiction and the role that science fiction plays in helping us approach problems from different perspectives. I really enjoyed this conversation with Christine. I hope that you get a lot out of it. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the Schools Out podcast. I don't have a fancy slogan for this, but it's like the podcast where we talk about how people learn outside of school. I'm sitting here with Christine Traxler. Christine is a mom to an almost 17-year-old who has attended a local Sudbury model school since she was 2.5 years old, and I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit more about that. She is also a public high school English teacher working in the areas of ungrading and equity. She is also equally passionate about critiquing how the American school system perpetuates the very systems progressive folks want changed, and articulating how and why public schools should be democratic and trust-based, much like the Sudbury model. Christine, thanks for sitting with me today across the country.
Great. It's good to meet you. Thanks for having me.
So for those who don't understand the tensions inherent in the Sudbury model versus the public school model, can you unpack that a little bit and then help us understand the tension that you've felt through the years, maybe?
Sure. Well, the Sudbury model, I'll just kind of start with that, I guess, because most people are very familiar with the public model and what that entails, but I'll talk about it sort of in comparison too. The Sudbury model has no curriculum, no teachers per se. There are adults on campus who consider themselves staff, but they consider themselves equal to the kids for the most part in terms of everyone has a vote. They call that the school meeting. And all the rules of the school are created together in conjunction with the students, staff, all of the major committees. The Justice and Compassion Committee, for instance, which is where any sort of conflicts that occur, this is where they are resolved, is within the Justice and Compassion Committee. And it's chaired by a student always. The school meeting is chaired by a student. So students are pretty much running the school. And then they decide what they do with their time all day. If they want to go play piano for 8 hours, they can. If they want to go read, if they want to take a nap, if they want to hang out and chat with each other, if they want to play on the playground, if they want to, go count salmon down at the creek, if they want, whatever they want to do, they go do during the day. Their time is their own. And it's a very trust-based model. So then you compare it to the public school model, which is compulsory in all ways. students don't have a choice for the most part in just about every realm of their life. They are at the high school level, and I can really mostly speak to the high school level. We have something called Core 24 in Washington State. So there are 24 core credits that kids have to get. And so they really don't have a choice what they're taking every single year. It's pretty much dictated. The choices are sort of toddler choices. Do you want the AP class or the regular class? Do you want do you want the red shirt or the blue shirt, right? And so it's sort of fake choice. And then once they're in the classes, it's a top-down curriculum from the teacher to the student. Often the teacher has also been, I guess, a recipient of the top-down model, right? From the district to the teacher to the student, maybe even the district, from the state to the district to the teacher to the student, maybe at the federal level, right? With Common Core. It is a hierarchy. It is a bureaucracy, and there's no trust uh, given to the kids for the most part. Very little trust that they can run their own lives, that they can dictate for themselves what their interests are. And so there's a very big tension there. And certainly as an English teacher, having to work within that system, yes, I see. I'm constantly dealing with that. Now luckily, there are, I don't know, 100 and something teachers in a building. So we have much more autonomy, I guess, in the classroom than we think we do often. And that's where I have tried to relieve some of that tension, is
Mhm.
kind of run the class the way I prefer to run it, even given the mandates of the school and of the district, and try to afford my students as much autonomy as possible within that space. So it's tough. I'm constantly running up against walls, constantly, and I have been for the last 20.
Mhm.
But I have felt
Oh,
that it's a good place to be, for me anyway. Somebody
mhm.
needs to also be pushing against those walls from the inside.
And I imagine that there is a tension in your own family from that, in the sense that not only do you not feel that what you're being asked to do is right, you don't feel that what you're being asked to do in public school is right most of the time. In other words, you have to break the rules in order to meet your kids' needs. But now, instead of just being respectful to your child in a public school, you're seeing your child being respected by other adults in a school model that is completely different than what you're teaching in. So I would imagine that that sometimes exacerbates the tension, but also it probably gives you some new things to try in your classroom. Is that accurate?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That is really accurate. Yeah. Yeah, I love that my daughter, who, when she was young, I'd say, "What did you do at school?" And she would just be like, "I don't know, I played, like whatever," right? I mean,
Right.
fingers on end, right? They just play. And that's of course the best thing that I could have heard. I'm like, so thankful that my kid
Mhm.
can go somewhere and just play all day. Yeah, yeah. Right. So that was very exciting to me. But I mean, as she's gotten older, she's certainly more articulate, and we have lots of great conversations about what's going on. And now she's chairing the what they call the Justice and Compassion Committee, and so I hear her over in Zoom all the time, kind of on these meetings and kind of doing her
Mhm.
thing. And but I think just how to work as a community, how to be in a democratic space with each other has really informed my teaching so much. And how not to control behavior has been a really big part of informing my teaching as well.
Mhm.
Um, and and how to, kind of work within the constraints of a curriculum, but at the same time, give students choices that aren't just toddler choices, but are very real. Here are my interests, kind of, you know, that has helped a lot. And then also just to talk with the teenagers at Clearwater, which I used to do a lot when I would go pick her up, and I would see them all hanging out. And I've actually had a few students at my high school who have just up and quit wouldn't my high school after hearing me talk about Clearwater, and they've finished
Mhm.
out their high school at Clearwater. I had one particular student who really taught me a lot. She really was hating reading. She was hating all sorts of things. And mostly it was, she was hating this sort of social environment at the high school, which of course can be very cliquey. It's a hierarchy, right? I mean, students are taught that life is competitive, that you have to compete for social capital, for all sorts of capital. And I mean, that's why we see the problems that we see in a public school setting, bullying, et cetera, right? Because it's such a hierarchy. And I would talk about Clearwater, and she finally came up to me one day and said, I think I need to go to this school. Can you talk to my parents? And luckily her parents were like, yeah, whatever she wants. So for the last year and a half of her high school career, she went to Clearwater. And she was so angry. She just kind of would go to Clearwater for maybe the first couple months. She would just sort of take naps and just have lots of conversations with people. And after about 2 months, somebody was reading something. It might have been a Stephen Hawking's book. And she said, hey, what is that? And within a month, she had a reading list that was like 2 pages long. And it was mostly theories on the universe. I mean, she was reading Brian Greene, she was reading string theories. All of a sudden, her mind just went,
Mm-hmm.
and she spent the next year and a half just going through this reading list, and she was just loved it. She was like, oh my God, I love to read. I didn't know I loved to read. I love to read. I had no idea. And that really, wow, opened my mind a lot about how we, engage the material and when we're best ready to learn something. Really, we do it at our own pace. We do it. There is no, there's no way someone from the outside can sort of force something on you if that's not where you are or where you want to be. That's just human nature.
I connect to that story a lot, and I appreciate you sharing it. And I see that story echoed again and again on social media from families who are experiencing unschooling and self-directed learning. But when I left school, I was basically convinced that I would never learn again, that I would just, I would refuse to, because it was such a negative experience for me. It was such a drain on my mental health. All I wanted to do was leave school every day, play music, play basketball with friends, and just be active in the world. And I hated reading. I never completed any reading assignments in school. I think I read one book in high school, and it was a book that wasn't for school. It was called From a Great Height, which was a book about Radiohead, which was my favorite band at the time. And but then I had a radical conversion in my faith in my mid 20s, and it's like I learned something for the first time and I felt how good it was, and then I just couldn't get enough. I started reading just constantly, and my wife and I joke about it because it's like every new book I read completely changes my world. So I just really resonate with that story.
Yes, it's a great story.
Talk to me a little bit about ungrading and some of the, how are some of the ways that you encourage? I'm sure you meet a lot of families throughout the school year and throughout many school years who are panicked about where their kids are in life and in academics. And what are some of the things that you feel like you share with them to help calm that anxiety and help them trust their learner,
Mm-hmm.
really, which is more than just trusting their own parenting instincts or trusting you. It's like, no, we need to push the trust to the learner, and it's their education. Can you share any insights about that?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I feel like I need to actually do more of that. That's Thank you. It's so funny how few parents I actually do end up talking to. At the high school level, I don't get a lot of
Okay.
parents who, I think they're just sort of, they're sort of expecting certain grades from their kids. And if those grades don't come in, then I'll get a call, right? But oddly enough, I started ungrading maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm surprised that I haven't had more pushback on it. But it was sort of, there were a few of us in the English department who decided to do this. And now there's only two of us left who are still doing it because the pressures that have come in from all angles have sort of
Mm.
stopped the others from doing it, including my own administration. And they're like, okay, we kind of like that you want to do something that's pushing the envelope, but if you cause problems for us, we're cutting it off, right? That's always
Mm.
there. And so with ungrading, we called it degrading for a while, which is really awful. It's an awful term. And I had one parent come in who really just wanted to talk about the nomenclature and how crappy our rhetoric was, right? Okay, sir, that's great. Thank you. We know it's bad. But I think it was Alfie Cohen or somebody who was calling it degrading or something. And so we'd gone with a term that we had
Mhm.
heard kind of out there in the literature because we wanted some literature to back us up when we were doing it. But we've since gone with ungrading because there's just such great resources out there now, and there's the book Ungrading and all that. That's at least the term I'm using. But we are, by contract, I am forced to give grades at midterm and semester. So I suppose I would get fired, I guess, if I didn't do it. I
Mhm.
suppose that would be the ultimate. But so the prerogative I have is just not to give any sort of letter or number grades on anything that students are doing in class in terms of assignments or any of the reading or writing that they're doing, which has made it really nice because it kind of puts the onus on them. I sort of talk about how their education really is in their own hands, right? At the beginning of school, that what they want to learn is is most important in this class. And so trying to sort of help them set some goals and kind of how are you going to meet those goals? And then working with feedback. And the feedback doesn't have to come from me. I tell them the best feedback is your own.
Mhm.
Like, let's say you want to write a memoir. I want to write a memoir this semester. I want to write a short story. I've always wanted to write poetry. And then, and I say the best teachers are people who are writing in those genres. And so I say, and feedback
Mm.
for you can mean, I've just read 10 poems by Billy Collin, and oh my God, I love the way he does X, Y, and Z. And I kind of want to do those in my poems too. And I said,
Mhm.
that's feedback, right? That's like,
Mhm.
you didn't have to get feedback from me or another adult, right? You trust your own feedback. And so as an English teacher, that's kind of been my goal, is to have them trust their own feedback, to trust it. Get feedback
Mm.
from your peers, from anybody you trust. It doesn't have to be just from me. There are no experts on this. And
Mm.
so that's been kind of my ungrading. That's what I'm trying to do in terms of ungrading. And and so they're constantly worried. Initially, they will worry. Am I getting an A? What am I, because it's a hierarchy, right? And I know grading would work best if everybody were doing it in the building.
Mm.
And in fact, if we didn't have grades at all, it would work really great because then kids would sort of naturally be able to put their time into their interests, right? And
Yeah.
that's where they'd spend most of their time. But that's boy, that's a battle that is going to be long fought.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Have you done research on where people think that concept of grading really comes down to, like where it came from?
Well, I would say it's white supremacy. I
Hmm.
would go right to it because it's a way of creating the caste system. Now, no, Wilkerson helped us with that term, but yeah, it's a way of. I just actually read this really great piece by Matthew B. Crawford called "Privilege," and I kind of had my own little seminar with some adult friends of mine last night about it. But he was sort of talking about how the university is essentially a kind of a way to separate people out, right? So you create this,
Hmm.
and the way to hide that elite caste is to talk about equity and to talk about diversity and to kind of veil the caste system in this supposed progressive ideology that what we're doing is
Hmm.
a more equitable society when we're not. And I see that at the public school level as well. We're trying to create a more equitable society by making sure every kid is educated, right, and ready for college and career and whatever their little tagline is. But what they're really doing is just sort of setting up a caste system. And grading really helps do that. It really helps sort out where these kids are going to go and how far they're going to go in life and that sort of thing within the capitalist system. It's really supporting the basic institutions of inequities in our society.
Hmm.
And it really helps to do that. I
Yeah.
think, there's all sorts of other reasons why it came about. It's certainly, colleges and universities, again, if they are the ultimate sorting ground, grades certainly enable them to very quickly sort who's going to come to their institution. It's a very quick way of getting a sense of who the kid is. I worked when I was getting my master's at the University of Washington, I worked in the undergraduate admissions office, and I had to put a number on every kid's admissions package. Every kid gets just one
Mm.
number, and that helps to sort them. And this is
Hmm.
after looking at their grades, what sort of classes did they take, how did they do on the SAT, the ACT, and then reading their college essay. And everything gets a little number, and then you add all those numbers up, and that's how they're chosen.
Hmm.
And it's a very quick way of doing it, cheap way of doing it, and it's inherently inequitable.
And it's really no different than the algorithms that social media platforms use to show you what content they're going to show you. It's a series of evaluations, and it's basically assigned a number, and those things show up in your feed in that order. um
Yeah. Wow.
it's kind of fascinating. I don't know a lot about that, but I know that, I just know that these are algorithms that really speeds up that thinking process, and that's kind of what that number system does. It's like it helps to sort of standardize it, and I think maybe depersonalize it,
Mhm.
where you the whoever's assigning the number can feel sort of distance from the consequences of that number by saying, look, I was just doing my job, I was just following protocol, and so if this is the cutoff line and student 755 didn't actually make it in, those are the breaks. I
Yep.
had to draw the line somewhere. I don't have anything more to say about it. Let's turn the conversation a little bit back to closer to home, your own family. The I think you have a very opposite experience to a lot of families who maybe can't afford to send their kid to a private school, or they cannot, or there's none in their area, but they work, and so they feel like they can't do unschooling,
Yep.
or self-directed learning at home. Where they have that inequitable, ungrading perspective, but their kid is in a public school. So maybe you can't speak to that as much, but I feel like you probably could. Like, how can we have respectful relationships with our kids
Mhm.
when they're coming to us from a bureaucratic environment? I mean, they're sort of bringing that worldview home with them, right?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I there's only so much you can do as a parent to control what happens to your kid
Hmm.
outside the house. But certainly, as a parent, you can engage in the trust-based relationship with your child that they would get at a Sudbury school, even in a Montessori type of kind of atmosphere, that you trust your child to make the best decisions for him or herself, and you support your child. You just say, hey, I am here to support you. I am your emotional support, I am your material support, and as you venture into the world and learn about the world, I am your ear, I am your shoulder, I am here, and I do not judge you, and I will not judge you. And I think the best we can do is not judge our children, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what their choices are. They want red hair, they want a tattoo, they want gauges, whatever. You don't judge. I have learned that. I've learned the hard way. And have watched my friends who who are a little more judgmental, and I have seen some relationships break down. And I have always taken that in and reminded myself, do not judge. Like, for instance, my daughter, when she was about 6, she really wanted to play the violin. Like, I play the violin, and she wanted to do it. So we got her involved in this teacher who was teaching her good friend Flora, and she started where, and it was Suzuki. And I remember doing Suzuki when I was a kid, but I only did it for a while, and I don't remember. I was just very self-driven, and didn't my parents weren't involved in that in it in any way whatsoever. But this teacher really wanted me, like, apparently the Suzuki model is very parent involvement, and the parent has to be sort of the stereotypical tiger mom. Like, it's time for violin, you must play. And so I was trying to fulfill my duty, right? And I was just right coming up, just
Yeah.
butting heads with my child. And I think that between the teacher and me, we really destroyed my daughter's
Mm,
love of the violin very quickly, very early on.
mm,
It was, I mean, within a couple of years, she was like, I'm done with this. I'm not going to do this anymore. And it was super disappointing to me because I was so excited that my daughter wanted to do something that I do, right?
yeah.
Okay. And I had to let that go. I had to let it go. And I had to give myself really big pep talks. And my husband, who's just much less, like, was much less involved, is like, just let it go. Who cares? I'm like, okay, you're right. You're right. And as it turns out, she couldn't help but not be a musician because she has grown up with music in her life since
Hmm.
she was in utero, and she's been hearing it all her life. And just letting her naturally find her place. My God, she's an amazing musician. She
Mm,
plays piano. She's figured it out all on her own. She plays guitar. She plays electric guitar. She's doing Joan Jett stuff right now. She's an amazing singer. She loves music. She can't have enough of it. She's just this incredible musician. And I letting it go, letting this sense of pride, like, I want her to be like me, and letting her be her own person, kind of found her way back to me in a lot of ways.
yeah.
Right? Like, just let it go. Let them be who they're going to be. Don't worry. they're
Yeah.
going to be really, they're going to be fine.
And that
Fine.
really kind of speaks to my next question. So you don't have to worry about answering it because you just really did. It's like if someone was worried about messing up as a parent, what story might you tell them? And I think that story illustrates it so well. And I use my story a lot. When I was working in the classroom, I taught primary. So I was a third and fourth grade teacher.
Mhm.
And and I would still have parents. I worked at a virtual school, so I spent a lot of time with the parents, and they would talk about all the worry that they had that their kid would mess up and, get a 75% on a fourth grade paper assignment. And I would use my story and say, look, I graduated high school with a 2.2 grade point average. And now, and then I went back to college and I scored 4.0s. Not that that's the only measure
Right.
of knowledge, but it's just like learning is learning. Like it can be recovered. Yeah, maybe there's some consequences that, but we don't know what those are. We don't know. Like there's the consequences probably more related to the practice of grading than anything else.
Yes. Yes. I would
Um,
totally agree with that.
and
Mhm.
it's I feel like there need to be more because there's so many negative experiences in schools, there's not enough positive stories of parents who are trusting their instincts and trusting their children. It's like we've found this tool in the middle of the forest and we've never seen anyone use it. So we don't know what it can do. So when someone says, well, trust your child, they the average person is like, I don't know what that means.
Right. Right.
I have never seen someone trust their child. I've never known what it felt like to be trusted. And these are married people. My wife and I are having this conversation all the time where it's like, do we even trust each other?
Mhm.
We're really unpacking that dynamic in our relationship where there's a lot of times that I don't truly trust her to give me solid advice about something in my life and vice versa. And it's like we've been married for almost 12 years now and it's like we're still not figuring some of this stuff out. Of course, some of that is going to trickle down to our kids. And, we didn't feel like we were ever trusted when we were kids. If it was trust, it wasn't actual trust. it was the parent giving up, like, fine, you can have what you want, but they didn't actually trust the decision. They didn't let it go, like you're saying. They held on to the resentment, but they sort of let go of the responsibility and sort of washed their hands of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely a difference because the kid will still feel judged. The kid will know,
Hmm.
right, that she's being judged by those parents. It really does take a lot to there's some acting involved, I think, as a parent initially, but it will
Mm.
come natural once you have done it enough. It really will. There's some acting where you're like, "Oh, that's wow, what a great outfit," right? This is, I mean, a simple thing, right? But my goodness, what beautiful colors you've put together, or whatever. You do whatever you can to affirm the choices of your child. Sometimes you start with acting, but it really does eventually evolve into this absolute respect you have for your kid as this unique
Hmm.
being. And you will be just utterly amazed at what they do on a daily basis when you engage in that trust and you're not constantly finding yourself disappointed. It's a surprise every day. And what amazing thing will my kid do today? Right?
I want to unpack that a little bit because I think I know what you mean, and it's an interesting thought. So you're saying that if we don't know how to trust our kids, what we might try is pretending that we trust them,
Yep.
and then eventually we will end up trusting them more often than we don't.
Oh, heck yeah.
That's so
Yes.
cool.
Yes.
It even sounds fun. I actually used to use that in school. It was like a kid would say, "Well, I don't know what to write about," which was, I mean, you've probably heard that 1,000 times a year. And every once in a while, I'd say, "Pretend you do."
Ah, nice. Mhm.
And it's like, it's almost like this safe to fail world that they can put themselves in.
Yeah. Ursula Le
Love
Guin
it.
talks about that too with sci-fi. She says the purpose of sci-fi really is to address problems we are having right here, right now. But we put it on
Hmm.
another planet. We put it on another planet. We put it in a different time period, and we can look at it more objectively. So that's a
Can you mention the author again? The audio cut out for a second.
Ursula Le Guin. She has a in her intro to Left Hand of Darkness. There's a little intro on the purpose of sci-fi, what sci-fi's for, what it really is. It's a
Mm.
way to work through problems we're having right here, right now, but we do it somewhere else and we can see it with a more objective kind of view. Um, I think back to the old Star Trek, which,
Mhm.
right, Captain Kirk and the cheesy sets they would have for landing on the
They're
planet.
so great.
They're so great. But, the 60s and 70s is just stamped all over that.
Hmm.
Um, and the issues and the tensions of the 60s and 70s are being played out through these characters and on different planets and I've always loved sci-fi for that purpose.
For me, it's the clear example that does that so well was The Matrix.
Oh yeah.
That story just, I mean, it fits so many of the tensions. And I didn't find out until I think it was just last year sometime that the two writers are transgender, and
Oh
they
right.
got a lot of their inspiration from their experiences in, experiencing that sort of, it's not quite out of body, but and there's, there's religious implications, there's school and bureaucracy implications in that. I mean, I can't watch that movie or think about that story without thinking about all the different tensions that we're experiencing in our culture right now. So that's
Yeah,
really,
it
I'm
is.
going to have to check that author out because I mostly read nonfiction, and I've been wanting to get into more fiction over the last few years. And I don't know where to start because I still have all this angst towards fiction from my English teachers growing up, which I
Right.
know you hate to
That's so sad.
hear.
That's so sad. I know. It really is. But yeah.
So I think we could probably talk about some more of this stuff for another couple hours, but I think that's a good place for us to stop today. And I just want to thank you for the insight and the work you're doing and for taking the time to sit and chat with me.
Oh, likewise. Thanks, Phil, for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Is there any place, if someone connects with you through this conversation, is there any place they should go besides your handle, which is at @T_Fiddler? Any other place where you kind of put up your work or some of your
No, that's a good start, I think. Yeah, just message me there if you want, and then happy to, engage elsewhere if we want after that. That's perfect.
awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you. All right. Thanks again.
Yep. Thank you.
There were several things from this conversation, and one thing in particular that sticks out. I love Christine's description of her story of her daughter learning to play violin and becoming a musician. I think it's a story that many of us can relate to, either as parents, feeling like we are pushing our kids to do a certain thing, or we felt that as kids that we were being pushed to do certain things. So if you liked Christine, find her on Twitter. She's fun to interact with. Not super active, but just an everyday parent like you and me, passionate about what it means to live respectfully with our kids. And if you stayed until the end of this video, thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next video, and don't stay in school.